Roughly 15 years ago, Acura introduced the very controversial styled ZDX to American showrooms all the way back in 2009. Now, at the time, the ZDX was Acura's answer to the also new BMW X6, the company's sports activity coupe, and some enthusiasts criticized Acura for being a little bit too ahead of its time, which is why the ZDX sales were a flop. The company discontinued it back in 2013. However, for 2024, the ZDX nameplate is back, and it once again follows in its predecessor's footsteps of being a slightly controversial vehicle, because the new ZDX is technically Acura's very first production battery electric SUV. And to bring this vehicle to market, everybody knows at this point that Acura went to General Motors to kind of co-develop the chassis for this vehicle. So as you can see, this week, Acura has loaned us the latest ZDX. This is a Type S variant, the first ever ZDX Type S, and with up to 500 horsepower underneath the hood and up to 278 miles of range, this is Acura's most powerful production SUV ever produced. Now, as you can see this week, this Snowfall Pearl Type S is going to be ours for the full week. We're going to put it through our usual battery of tests. And at the end of this video, we're going to find out, has Acura managed to create a luxury electric SUV that is worthy of going head to head with a lot of its European and American rivals? Stay tuned to find out. Now, before we start talking about the exterior styling of the latest Acura ZDX Type S, let me go ahead and pop the hood and show you guys what's underneath here. A lot of EVs tend to have a frunk. However, because this vehicle shares a platform with something like the Cadillac Lyriq, you guys will remember that vehicle doesn't have a frunk, which also carries over here under the hood of the latest ZDX. Now, as you can see underneath this plastic shroud, which boldly says Acura to kind of remind you this is, again, an Acura vehicle. Although if you start poking around the hood, you'll see a couple of stickers here that says GM. There's also a couple of stickers here that says General Motors LLC. So again, this car doesn't really try to hide the fact that it is a GM underneath the hood. Although again, that big, bold Acura badge there underneath the hood is kind of funny to see. But once we get underneath here, let's go ahead and talk about the powertrain specs. Now, Acura here in America offers the ZDX in two powertrain configurations, the A-spec and of course the Type S. The A-spec is available in rear or all-wheel drive. The rear-wheel drive model makes this vehicle the first rear-wheel drive Acura-branded SUV. I say Acura-branded because it's not technically an Acura-built SUV. It's built in Mexico by General Motors, or it's built in Detroit, I believe. But this Type S variant adds a front electric motor, so it's got dual electric motors front and rear, delivering 499 horsepower and 544 pound-feet of torque. I said 500 horsepower earlier. I basically just want to give Acura that extra horsepower because 500 is a much better number to say versus 499. This powertrain does have roughly 9 more horsepower and about 107 more pound-feet of torque versus the A-spec all-wheel drive variant of the ZDX, which is kind of funny because you think the Type S would have a lot more horsepower. It does have over 100 more foot-pounds of torque, and this also has more torque versus the all-wheel drive variant of the Cadillac Lyriq. Keep in mind that there could be an even quicker ZDX coming for 2025 or 2026 because Cadillac just revealed the Lyriq V, which should have over 600 horsepower. There's also the Chevrolet Blazer EV SS that has almost 600 horsepower. So I would imagine that Acura is going to try to push GM to give them the more potent variants of this powertrain, but only time will tell. Acura hasn't released any specs on the 2025 ZDX at this moment. Now, it all goes out through a 1-speed reduction gear transmission. All ZDXs use a 102 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery pack, good for up to 319 miles of range, I believe, or 278 on this particular model here. Acura says 0 to 60 should be in under 5 seconds. We'll test it out when we get out on the road. Top speed for this vehicle should be just under 120 miles an hour or so. Towing capacity is around 3,500 pounds, and this is a big, heavy SUV. It weighs in at just over 6,000 pounds, making it the most heavy Acura branded SUV ever produced. But let's go ahead and close up the hood here and talk about the exterior styling of this car. Now, even though this vehicle does share a platform with the Cadillac Lyriq or Blazer EV, you wouldn't be able to tell that from the outside. The Acura design team has done a fantastic job at giving this vehicle a true Acura design language at the front fascia. You can see my particular test car is painted in Snowfall Pearl, which actually is technically a GM color, although Acura has rebranded it with different naming. You can see it has the full LED headlights, the jewel eye LEDs with the chicane style LED daytime running light and full LED turn signal. The ZDX also includes an illuminated Acura grille at the front where it has that little kind of outline of the grille with the diamond pentagon, of course, with the big Acura logo that houses the radar sensors for the adaptive cruise, which this vehicle actually comes with a variation of GM Super Cruise. They call it Acura Watch 360 Plus with hands-free drive. You can see the front fascia has a little bit more of an aggressive look. I like the kind of silver with the black, gloss black accents. I apologize for how dirty the car is. It's been snowing and cold here in the PA area where I'm at, so the car is kind of covered in some salt and whatnot. The Type S model also has some active grille shutters, and overall, with this white exterior color with the two-tone black roof, it definitely is an attractive looking SUV. It looks like it belongs in the Acura family. Now, of course, being built off of the General Motors Ultium architecture, this vehicle has a pretty long wheelbase, just under 122 inches. Its overall length is 197.7. It's literally got a longer wheelbase, and it's only an inch shorter than the Acura MDX. So if you're trying to figure out the difference between the two, the ZDX is almost the same size, but it has far less interior space, and it only seats 5 as opposed to 7 in the MDX. So kind of keep that in mind. These 22-inch wheels are the largest production wheels Acura has ever put on any vehicle. They're riding on a 275 by 45 275 by 40 R22 Michelin Primacy all-season tires. You can see the brakes are upgraded on the Type S. They are 15.3 inches in the front, clamped down by a 6-piston caliper, which are branded by Brembo. It's also yellow painted. The rears are smaller at 13.2 inches, I believe. You do have an adaptive air suspension on the ZDX Type S. This is the only ZDX to get the adaptive air suspension. It comes with about 7 inches of ground clearance when the vehicle is in its normal setting. You can raise and lower it, of course. The wheel arch trim, as you can see, is gloss black painted. And then over here on the side, this is where you charge the vehicle with the big Type S badge there on the actual charge port door. Unlike the Cadillac or the Chevy, you do have just a manual style opening door for the charge port, which should actually be better for longevity and reliability. You can see this model still uses the J1772 plug. The vehicle can accept up to 190 kilowatts on a DC fast charger and has an 11.5 kilowatt onboard charger, which means you can basically charge this vehicle from 0 to 100% on a level 2 in about 9 to 10 hours. On a level 3, it'll take about 30 minutes to go from 10 to 80%, so kind of keep that in mind. It's not the quickest charging EV, but it is very competitive. You can see the mirrors here are gloss black painted. They are power folding, integrated turn signals with 4 cameras surrounding the vehicle. There's a little bit of chrome along the upper part of the window trim. I also like the fact that the panoramic sunroof is standard. That's typically $2,000 extra on the Cadillac Lyriq, along with those low profile black painted roof rails, which look nice. If I back away from the vehicle, you can see this is where the ZDX tries to look a little bit more like a wagon. It doesn't kind of have the proportions of an SUV. It again kind of gives you the coupe-like SUV interior space, even though the outside looks a little bit more conventional. Again, it just kind of looks like a long roof wagon. I also like the fact that the rear taillights also have that kind of chicane style. They are a full LED, as you can see, with LED reverse lights, LED brake lights, and turn signals. I kind of wish the Type S had a slightly larger, more pronounced rear spoiler. This is the camera, of course, for the digital camera review mirror. You have a traditional wiper blade, and then, of course, the badging back here, there's another Type S badge with the ZDX and that E-plug badge over there that kind of shows Acura's new electric vehicle badge. The rear bumper also looks a little bit more aggressive. I really like this color combination. Again, the silver trim along the side and the rear isn't quite as obnoxious as other darker colors of the ZDX that you can get it in. You can see opening up the tailgate, that power liftgate's included. And even though this vehicle is almost the same size as an MDX on the outside, you do have significantly less cargo. Acura says you have around 28.7 cubic feet with the back seats up. If you look underneath the floor here, there's a little bit of underfloor storage, which is definitely nice. It's not the deepest underfloor storage area. I kind of wish it was a little bit more like some competitors. If I want to fold down the rear seats, you can see just push that little button that folds the rear seats down to create up to 62.7 cubic feet of storage space. 62.7 is perfectly adequate. It's a little bit more versus the Cadillac Lyriq and the Chevrolet Blazer EV, but compared to the MDX has roughly 20 to 30 more cubic feet, and the MDX on the outside is only about an inch longer. So it is a little bit perplexing to see the packaging of this vehicle. It really shows that General Motors could have done better here with giving the interior more space versus some rivals. So on the outside, Acura did a fantastic job with infusing this vehicle with the typical Acura styling language, but what about the interior? Before we get inside, let me show you guys the key fob. For those of you who know GM vehicles, you'll recognize this key as GM's latest intelligent access key with the Acura logo. The key itself is fine, although I really would have preferred Acura to at least use their key fob, which is a really nice fob. So that's kind of a little detail that I wish they would have sweated. You can see it has the usual buttons here for lock, unlock, remote start, power liftgate, and a panic function. The key itself feels relatively decent quality. It just looks weird, of course, with the Acura logo. Now, as I approach the door handle, you can see, unlike the Lyriq, which has those pop-out electronic door handles, the ZDX has a traditional door handle. If you touch the back of the door handle, that doesn't unlock the door. You have to actually touch the button. That unlocks the door for you. This vehicle also has the walk-away auto lock function, which is something that you also find in some GM vehicles. Now, when I open up the door, you can see my particular test car in the Snowfall Pearl exterior with the red premium Milano leather. Definitely is a wonderful color combination. These seats are unique to the Type S. They are adjustable in 16 different ways. You can also adjust the bolstering extension here. You can also adjust the thigh extender right there. It has the traditional location, of course, for adjusting the seats. Typical GM switchgear I'm seeing there, but the seats do have a 2-person memory on the driver and on the passenger side, which is a nice touch. The door panel, you can see, has some pretty nice materials. This is a soft touch injection molded plastic. This is a real genuine brushed aluminum trim. There's some alloy along the door handle here. There's some ambient lighting in here where you can change the color. It's nice and padded leather over here. Window controls are one touch up down. These are again GM switchgear, so everything in here takes it out of the GM's parts catalog. Down here it is hard touch plastic. There's your trunk release, and then this car also comes with an 18-speaker Bang & Olufsen stereo, which is included on this trim. It sounds really good. If you guys are an audiophile, you're going to really appreciate that. The Type S also includes alloy sport pedals. I apologize for how dirty it is. And you can see the steering wheel has a variation of GM Super Cruise. That's the status bar over there to let you know when it's active. Now, getting inside, you can see with 7 inches of ground clearance, this has a relatively easy step-in height. As I shut the door, the door has a relatively solid sounding thunk. I don't love the way the noise sounds when it shuts. I've heard some nicer sounds from Acura's other vehicles like the MDX. Now, once you're inside, you can see everything in here should feel pretty familiar, especially with the layout of this cabin. You can tell Acura wanted it to feel like an Acura. When I get in and start the car up, the start-stop button is located right here. Push that, you can hear that chime comes from General Motors. So that's something, again, a detail that I wish Acura would have just replaced it with their traditional chime. Most of you probably wouldn't even notice that, but that's something myself, as I literally get into hundreds of vehicles every year, are gonna notice that little small detail. The steering wheel, as you can see, is also a GM steering wheel with the Acura logo, the typical GM buttons here. You have buttons on the back to adjust the volume and the audio controls. That paddle there gives you maximum regen when you pull and hold that. That's the Super Cruise button over here. The steering wheel itself has a power tilt telescoping function with a good amount of adjustability, so it's pretty easy to get in this vehicle and get a comfortable driving position. The Type S also includes a heads-up display, which is nice. The material quality on the dash, you can see there's real leather over the instrument panel hood, real leather over here. This is definitely not the brushed alloy that you get from the door panel. This feels like a gray painted plastic, which I would have preferred if this was aluminum, but I like how it's not a piano black plastic. This infotainment system, you can see, has Google built in. It's an 11.3-inch touchscreen with an 11-inch center or instrument panel display where you can kind of customize this. You can actually put the Google map over here along with your Apple Maps as well, along with your driver assist information. And then over here, unlike the GM branded vehicles, this car does have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So this is technically GM's older software as opposed to the Lyriq, which has the big 33-inch display, or the Blazer, which has the 17.7-inch display. Both of those vehicles lack Apple CarPlay, so that's another reason, again, to choose the Acura. It also has a Wi-Fi hotspot built in. It has embedded GPS, of course, with Google built in. I do notice at times the system is a little bit slow to respond, but I also notice it's not as terrible as the last Honda Prologue that I tested. The Prologue, if you guys remember on camera, I was trying to adjust certain settings and whatnot, and the screen literally froze when I was kind of going in between different software settings. So this is definitely an improvement, but there are times where I notice I have to kind of tap very diligently on that certain icon, and there are times where the backup camera also refused to come on. But as you can see, there's the backup camera now. It has a full 360 camera, multiple different views, curved views, of course. You can turn on and off the, I guess those are the distance markers, but again, there's where I notice it lags a little bit. When I put the vehicle into reverse, there's where it turns on the distance markers. You can see it gives you trajectory, it gives you rear cross traffic braking, automatic braking and stuff like that. So really good quality resolution. It just takes, again, a little getting used to if you guys aren't used to the software that General Motors uses. Now you can see the transmission selector is located here. Acura typically does like a button style with a massive rotary dial to control your drive mode selectors. This is, again, GM's parts bin. Park is accessed by pushing the end there to go to P. Reverse is pulling towards you, then going up. Neutral is pulling towards you and holding, and then pull towards you and go down to go to drive. So again, pretty easy to use, but it doesn't make me feel like I'm in an Acura branded vehicle. Your drive mode selector is here as opposed to being in the center. When you start switching that, you can see there's a normal, there's a snow mode, there's a sport mode, and then there's an individual mode. So that also can affect the dampers, and if you want to adjust the air suspension, there's a separate button over here that also turns off your lane keep assist, of course. And then down here you can see there's your dual zone climate control system with actual buttons to control your heat and ventilation controls for your seats. I like how this is pretty easy to use, but again, it looks like it's been lifted directly out of like a Chevy or a GMC. You have two USB-C charging ports here, another traditional power outlet, of course. There's some nice leather stitching here. I like how this is a non-slip area. You have cup holders, then you have your wireless phone charging pad here. Although this kind of flops around, it doesn't really have a nice little area where it will secure your phone snugly in here, but the wireless charger I did notice worked pretty decently for me. You have a padded center console here. If I open this up, you can see deep center console storage area, which is nice. These seats, I don't know if they're a GM seat, but they certainly look unique to the ZDX. I like how the fact that you have 16 different ways of adjustment. I like the Type S badge embossed into there. The headrest is a little bit chunky, but I found the seats to be comfortable and supportive, so that's really good for those longer drives. You can see the glove compartment is damped but not lined with felt. It's a bin style. And then the Bang & Olufsen stereo, like I said, is also a really nice touch if you guys are an audiophile. And because this is an EV, you're gonna really appreciate that. So overall, the fit and finish and the material quality in this vehicle is probably the best that I've tested in any Ultium branded vehicle. So I'm really happy to see that Acura was kind of sweating that detail, and they were kind of, I guess, reminding GM, hey, we build luxury vehicles. We won't accept any intolerances to the build quality. So I'll be curious, if you guys own this vehicle, let me know how the build quality is in the comment section below for your personal vehicle. Over here you can see digital camera rearview mirror that's exclusive to the Type S, in addition to the Super Cruise, which Acura calls it hands-free drive. Above me you can see there's a woven material for the headliner, big panoramic glass roof, which also tilts and opens up to vent air. This is a standard equipment feature. It's optional on something like the Cadillac Lyriq, so it's nice that Acura, again, gives you a little bit more value with their car. But overall, I really like the cabin quality. I like the way the cabin looks. It just has a little bit too much GM switchgear for me, which could be a good or bad thing depending on your preference. But let's go ahead and hop into the backseat area and show you guys what that space is like with the massively long wheelbase of this car. Acura says you have 39.5 inches of legroom back here, which is actually about an inch more legroom versus what you get in the MDX. Although the MDX has 3 rows, you can see the material quality back here is also nice. Soft touch injection molded plastic, brushed aluminum trim, ambient lighting, nice padded leather here. It's hard touch plastic here, and you also get these manual retractable shades, which is a nice touch if you guys have kids. Once you get back here, you can see the floor is completely flat. I again apologize for how dirty it is. As I shut the door, ignore that rattle. That was the bottle of detail spray that I have there. You can see with the flat floor, it does offer plenty of space, so I can easily stretch my legs. This is pretty much where I'd have the seat to drive. I can easily cross my legs and get comfortable back here, which is nice. I did notice, however, this kind of has like a little bit of a, I guess like a slope where it kind of falls down into the middle. I also wanted the thigh extender to be a little bit better here. You can see rear seat, passengers enjoy rear seat climate control vents. You have tri-zone climate control along with heated rear seats, 3 levels back here with 2 more USB-C charging ports and an actual 12-volt power outlet. You also get 2 storage cubbies in each of the front seats. And you also have an armrest that folds down and gives you 2 cup holders. The panoramic sunroof, as you can see, comes all the way into the second row area. This kind of intrudes a little bit on rear seat headroom. At 5'7", you can see my hair, I only have maybe about a ½ inch of additional clearance, so that's not a lot because of that lower roof line. But overall, if you guys do plan to use this as a family vehicle, there is good legroom space. There's also the ability to kind of recline this seat slightly. That's the most it's going to let you recline it via this little area there, which gives you basically 2 different positions to click it in. But overall, the backseat area is certainly usable. Just keep in mind, some competitors do offer a little bit more headroom space. So here we are back behind the wheel of the return for Acura's ZDX. As you guys know, the ZDX has always been a weird model for Acura, and now the company has brought it back in its 2nd generation, although again, it's even weirder because Acura doesn't even build this car. It's built by General Motors, and it shares basically the same platform with the Cadillac Lyriq, the Chevrolet Blazer EV, but this is my first time getting the ZDX Type S for a full week back home, where I can actually put it through my battery of testing where, you know, it's kind of on level playing ground with the other models that I've tested back home. And the last time I tested a Lyriq with all-wheel drive, which is, I would say, the closest equivalent to the ZDX Type S on this stretch, I got 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds. Remember, this car has just shy of 500 horsepower, 499, but it has 544 foot-pounds of torque. That's almost 100 more foot-pounds of torque versus the Lyriq, and it also has around 107 more foot-pounds of torque versus the a-spec all-wheel drive ZDX. So even though this car only has 9 more horsepower, it does have over 100 more pound-feet of torque, which should make a difference 0 to 60 wise. We are starting off with about an 80% state of charge. I have the vehicle in sport mode, and let's just floor it and see what we can get. Oof. Feels pretty quick. 0 to 60 in 4.48 seconds there. So 4.48 is pretty quick. Acura basically said it would be under 5 seconds, and that time makes it around 0.3 seconds faster versus the last Lyriq that I tested with all-wheel drive. Which, remember, has 515 horsepower, but it has 450 pound-feet of torque. This also makes the ZDX Type S about a second faster versus the last MDX Type S that I tested. Now, I know some of you may be thinking, why can't I just compare the two vehicles? You can't, because this car isn't even an Acura. It's built by General Motors. It's a fully electric vehicle. It has 500 horsepower almost. It's the most powerful production SUV that bears the Acura badge. Notice how I didn't say it's built by Acura, because it's not built by Acura. Let's try another run here. This time I'm going to try brake torquing it and see if it makes a difference. Oof. 4.77 seconds there. So brake torquing it really doesn't make a difference. What I notice about this car, just like in the Lyriq, Acura has tuned the throttle response on this thing to be kind of progressive. So it doesn't give you instant full power when your foot goes to the floor. It takes maybe a second or so for the power to ramp up. Now, when you are already moving and your foot goes to the floor, this thing gives you that instant thrust that you're expecting. Remember, it's a 1-speed reduction gear transmission. There's no gears, there's no engine to rev up, no turbos to spool up. Just put my foot down and it just feels quick. It also makes that fake engine sound, that electric motor sound, but it definitely feels properly fast when you put your foot down. Now, granted, if you're new to driving EVs, this is gonna feel mind-blowingly fast. If you've driven other fast EVs like Teslas, for example, this isn't gonna feel all that quick compared to some other vehicles. I mean, for a car that wears the Type S badge, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, I think is acceptable. I think it should have been closer to 3.5 seconds. Remember, this particular platform, there's an even quicker model, the Blazer EV SS, which delivers nearly 600 horsepower. Chevy says that model will get to 60 in about 3.4 seconds. That, I think, should have been the powertrain to power the ZDX Type S. We also were just told about the Cadillac Lyriq V, which the Lyriq V, we don't know the power figures just yet, but I expect that model to also have around 600 horsepower. So don't be surprised if Acura decides for 2025 or 2026 to up the power on the ZDX Type S. So this first model year that we're driving, which is a 2024, has almost 500 horsepower, but for 2025 or 26, it could have 600 horsepower. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, what I love about this chassis, the Ultium architecture, is it's an incredibly well-balanced chassis. It's got a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, and even though this car weighs over 6,000 pounds, it does a pretty good job at hiding its weight. Now, granted, the ZDX Type S also comes with an adaptive air suspension, which I believe is unique to the Acura. It certainly makes this vehicle ride really nicely, although with the 22-inch wheels, you do feel more of the bumps coming through at times, but just kind of keep that in mind when you're driving around in a vehicle with 22s. Let's try another run here. Oh, very nice. 4.52 seconds there, so we'll take the 4.48 as our quickest time. 4.5 again is perfectly adequate, but I think there's definitely room for improvement. A Type S branded SUV like this with this kind of power should be doing it in under 4 seconds, but that's kind of just the world that we live in nowadays. But let's go ahead and switch the drive mode selector out of the sport mode here. I'll just put it into its normal mode, which, by the way, for an Acura model, Acuras, especially the Type S models, are known for their big rotary dial here to change the drive mode. That's kind of a signature thing with a lot of Acura models, and you can tell Acura didn't do that here. Instead, I have a teeny tiny switch over here by my left knee. that basically allows you to change your drive mode when it should be here in the middle, but that's not what General Motors does. So that's partly the reason why this vehicle, again, you can feel the GM-ness in this interior. Now, granted, Acura has done a good job at making this vehicle feel a lot nicer. In fact, out of all the Ultium platform vehicles that I've tested that are SUVs, this feels like it's the best build. It doesn't have a single squeak or rattle from the interior. It feels very tightly made. These 16-way adjustable seats, which are power, they have the Milano leather, they have a heat and ventilation function. They hold you in place pretty nicely. You can also adjust the bolstering. Acura did their part to make this interior feel nice. The steering wheel, however, is General Motors. It does have their form of Acura Watch 360 Plus with hands-free driving, which is basically Super Cruise. It's the only Honda branded vehicle, Acura branded vehicle, that has GM's version of their Super Cruise. And I had a chance to test it out on some longer trips. The Super Cruise system works pretty much as well as other GM vehicles, but I did notice there are times where it didn't do a great job at keeping me centered in the lane, and I have a feeling it's probably their previous generation Super Cruise, not their latest generation, because of course GM would save the best for their actual vehicles. Visibility in this car is pretty good out of the front, the side. The rear also is pretty good, considering the previous generation ZDX had that sloping roof. This, again, doesn't have that, and if you want better visibility, just put it into the rear view camera mirror, or you can kind of go out of that if you guys don't prefer that. Interior is also very quiet. Aside from the fake engine noise, which you can turn off when you put it into the different drive modes, it just glides down the road with a level of solidity. It feels like a tank. It feels really smooth and quiet, and it has that instantaneous power. Now, in terms of range, this car is rated at 278 miles on a full charge. That's what the computer was also showing when it was on a full charge. It's been cold here, as you can see. There's snow on the ground. It's been in below 32-degree mark all week since I've had this car, and in my week's worth of testing, I only averaged around 210 miles of real world range. Now, of course, that's with it being super cold. That's with it more on the highway. Whenever I get one for a week, hopefully in the warmer temperatures, I can retest it, see what we can do. I believe I've gotten better range in the Lyriq. The Lyriq technically gets better EPA range versus this car. They both have the same 102 kilowatt hour battery pack. But it's interesting because I've had a chance to spend basically a week with the Prologue, with the Equinox EV, with the Blazer EV, with the Lyriq, and I have to say the ZDX Type S may actually be my favorite. Is it the most avant-garde in terms of tech or in terms of luxury? No, but I think Acura has done a really good job at adding their touch to this vehicle. At the same time, I'm very familiar with GM vehicles. I think the average consumer may get into this car and may not realize it's a GM vehicle because they've done a pretty good job at hiding it. But other than that, I do think that this car's Type S badge, at least in its first model year, is not quite worthy of the Type S badge, at least until Acura decides to, add more power for the next model year, hopefully, add something that makes it feel a little bit more distinctively Type SE. But 4.5 seconds, 500 horsepower, certainly great specs, but it does get me curious to see what Acura is going to do for the next model year, which, as of this filming in January, they haven't announced anything yet on the 2025 ZDX. So after spending a full week with the latest Acura ZDX, I have to say I've had the opportunity to be able to drive a lot of different Ultium branded SUVs. This platform in general had a little bit of a slow rollout when it first came out back in 2022, I believe, with the original Lyriq. Today, of course, Acura and Honda are actually reaping the rewards because they have one of the top selling vehicles that use the Ultium architecture. In fact, the Acura ZDX has been on sale since May of last year, and last year the company says they managed to sell just under 7,400 units total here in the US. That actually makes this the best-selling number that Acura has ever done for ZDX sales. I think back in 2010 at their peak, they did around 3,300 units. I suspect with a full calendar year, if Acura is able to get the word out, get the lease rates really strong, they should be able to do between 10 to 15,000 ZDXs here in America. In fact, the Lyriq, this car's platform make, Cadillac did around 28,000 units. The Honda Prologue, again, this car's platform made, although a less expensive variant, Honda sold around 33,000 units in the US last year. So there is some potential here for this car to be a relatively strong seller. And after spending a full week with this vehicle, I actually have to admit, this is my favorite Ultium branded SUV out there. I think Acura did a great job with the exterior design. They did a great job with the ride and handling balance. They did a great job with the powertrain. 0 to 60 happens in 4.5 seconds, although I suspect for 2025, they're probably going to increase the power, maybe take the powertrain from the Blazer EV SS. That would be a great option. This thing should have closer to 600 horsepower because, again, this is a Type S branded SUV. The real world range I was disappointed in, but it's also been really cold and snowy here in my area. So around 210, 220-ish miles in the cold is not bad. I suspect this car will probably do closer to that 280 in the real world based on my testing on the Lyriq, which actually was able able to match or do better versus the actual real world range in my actual testing. In terms of the interior, I do wish that Acura had gotten rid of that stupid GM bong. I don't like the chime there, but again, that's a slightly minor thing. For those of you who aren't used to basically being in so many vehicles like myself, you might get in this car and be completely fooled and not notice that it's actually built by GM. The build quality is surprisingly good, not a single squeak and rattle. Material quality is good. The seats are comfortable. The back seat offers a good amount of space. The infotainment system, unlike the GM counterparts, actually has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so I like the fact that Acura decided to keep that around. The trunk space is usable, but it is small considering how big this vehicle is. Now, if you guys are, able to overlook the fact that this is kind of a stopgap vehicle, because Acura is working on their dedicated EV, which should be coming in 2026, most likely. Acura does offer some pretty decent deals, and they've also priced the vehicle relatively competitively. If you're trying to get into a base ZDX A-spec with rear-wheel drive, it'll cost you around $64,500. Add all-wheel drive, it'll be around $4,000 extra, so around $68,500. To me, that's kind of the sweet spot, because if you guys want to go to a Type S variant, the Type S will cost you at least $74,100. So it's a hefty $6,000 to $7,000 more over the all-wheel drive A-spec to go to the Type S, and really what you're getting here is the adaptive air suspension, the larger 22-inch wheels, the Type S styling elements. You also get around 9 more horsepower and 107 more foot-pounds of torque, but you also have less range versus the A-spec all-wheel drive. So you really have to like the styling and get a good deal on the Type S, because I don't think that this Type S now is worthy of the Type S badge. It certainly gives you some nice luxury equipment and a sportier look, but it doesn't really have that fire that you typically find in most Type S models, especially if you guys have driven like the Integra Type S or even the TLX Type S. The MDX Type S is technically slower and less powerful than this vehicle here. Now, my test car here, as equipped with destination and the upcharge for the paint, you're looking at just under 76 grand, which actually is relatively well priced if you're comparing it to like a BMW iX or Mercedes-Benz EQE. The Cadillac Lyriq starts at around $59,000, but if you guys add it with all-wheel drive and you have it relatively similarly equipped, the Cadillac can be priced between $75,000 to $80,000, so it's actually about the same, if not a little bit more expensive versus the Acura. The lease special on this car currently, as of this filming in January 2025, is around $489 a month for an A-spec rear-wheel drive. That's around a 3-year lease with around $4,000 down. That lease special is decent, although the Prologue leases for about half that, which is probably why the Prologue outsells this car significantly. So I'm imagining when Acura can kind of get the word out a little bit more, get the lease specials down a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised to see this vehicle do even better in terms of sales, but overall right now as a stopgap, it certainly is worth a look, but just keep in mind again that there will be a fully dedicated Acura EV coming very soon, and I also wouldn't be surprised to see Acura increase the power on the Type S for 2025 or for 2026. But all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new 2024 Acura ZDX Type S. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.